Hello and welcome back to Chapter 4 of the React Foundations course found on the Next.js website. If you are brand new to React and Next.js, this is a great opportunity for you to learn the basics of React and work your way up to Next.js. This is Chapter 4, so if you haven't seen 1, 2, and 3, go back and watch those. And also, if you're an aspiring web developer and looking for a great community, come join us over on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/code noobs and join the community. We have a great community over there of aspiring web developers, people who are already building in React and Next.js and can teach you a lot of cool stuff. You can ask questions. We have free weekly live streams all about different topics related to web development. So come join us over there. We have an amazing community, and the best part is it's free. So we'll see you over there. But for now, let's get right into it. We're on Chapter 4, getting started with React. Okay, so to use React in a newly created project, load 2 new React scripts from an external website called unpackage.com or unpkg.com. React is the core library, right? React is the core React library, and React DOM provides DOM-specific methods that enable you to use React with the DOM. So these are kind of long and they're URLs, so I don't want to write those out because I want to make sure that I get them right. So I'm going to just copy and paste them into our project that we already have, and they're going to go right below our div and right above our previous script. So we can see those here. I have Prettier on, so it's going to readjust those. And basically, they're just 2 scripts that go to this source so that we're pulling in those libraries, the React library and the React DOM library. Instead of directly manipulating the DOM with plain JavaScript, remove the DOM methods that you had added previously and add the React DOM create root method to target a specific DOM element and create a root to display our React components in. Then add the root.render method to render your React code to the DOM. This will tell React to render our h1 title inside our hashtag app element. So I'm going to write this part out. So the first thing we're going to do is erase everything that we have already. And I'm going to rewrite const app equals document dot get element by ID and select our app. Okay, so we're basically creating a variable for that element that we have, and then we're doing const root equals React DOM dot create root, and we're feeding in our app, and then root dot render, and we're going to just put in our h1, and I'm going to do develop preview ship. And let me close that tag. So now we're only down to really three lines of code. And so just to walk through this a little bit, and I'm sure I'll read through this again, but const app equals document.getElementID. So we're really just like grabbing this element, and then we are declaring this. We're creating a root inside of here, and then we're taking that root, right? We're creating a variable called root, which is really this div here. Okay, so in React, we always have to have a root, which is what's going to contain our entire application. Typically, it's called app, so I can understand why they did that. And if you're wondering where this came from, it's coming from these imports that we just did. And then once we've declared that variable root, which is this div, we are rendering inside of that our h1, okay? So if you try to run this code in the browser, you will get a syntax error, and it will say something like uncaught syntax expected got something there. So let's see. Did we get that error? Uncaught expected a little caret, right? This is because h1 is not valid JavaScript. This piece of code is JSX. So what is JSX? JSX is a syntax extension for JavaScript that allows you to describe your UI in a familiar HTML-like syntax. The nice thing about JSX is that apart from following 3 JSX rules, you don't need to learn any new symbols or syntax outside of HTML and JavaScript. But browsers don't understand JSX out of the box, so you need a JavaScript compiler such as Babel to transform your JSX code into regular JavaScript. So before we do that, let's see what these 3 rules are. So return a single root element. That's rule number 1. Close all tags. Rule number 2. And camel case all most of the things. Okay, so yeah, so anything you're gonna see, instead of using class, we start to use something else called class name because class is a reserved word. So just keep those rules in mind as we work through this, but understand that this is technically JSX, which stands for JavaScript XML, and it's not actually HTML. It looks a lot like it, but there's some really powerful things that we're going to be able to do with this. But before we do that, we need to add Babel to our web application here so that we can actually transform this from JSX, which it is right now, into JavaScript. So to add Babel to your project, copy and paste the following script into your HTML. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to place it, if we notice, right above this script that we have here. So right there. All right. To confirm it's working correctly, open your HTML file in your browser, comparing the declarative React code you just wrote. So let's take a look. Let me close that, and I'll reload this. So we missed something here. So in addition, we'll need to inform Babel that what code to transform by changing the script type to text.jsx. Okay, so I also need to add this to here. So this should be, instead of JavaScript, it should be JSX. So that's the issue we're getting. And there we go. Now we have our code working. I can reload the page and we'll see there's no errors. Pretty awesome. So now we went from a bunch of code to just this. Pretty cool. All right. And you may have noticed also that if you have some styling in your VS Code, that this sort of just changed from JavaScript into what looks like just raw text. And that's because we changed that from JavaScript to JSX. Pretty cool. So comparing the declarative React code that you just wrote. So right now we wrote, in the script tag about 3 lines of code. In the imperative JavaScript code you wrote in the previous section, that was 6 lines of code. So significantly longer. And 2 of these lines of code were really just a setup, right? You can start to see how using React enables you to cut down a lot of repetitive code. And this is exactly what React does. It's a library that contains reusable snippets of code that perform tasks on your behalf. In this case, updating the UI. Additional resources. So you don't need to know exactly how React updates the UI to start using it. But if you'd like to learn more, here are some additional resources. So UI trees, writing markup with JSX, React DOM server sections in the React documentation. Essential JavaScript for React. While you learn JavaScript and React at the same time, being familiar with JavaScript can make the process of learning React easier. In the next sections, you will be introduced to some core concepts of React with a JavaScript perspective. Here's a summary of the JavaScript topics that will be mentioned. So functions and arrow functions, objects, arrays and array methods, destructuring, template literals, ternary operators, ES modules, and import-export syntax. And while this course does not dive into JavaScript, it's good practice to stay up to date with the latest versions of JavaScript. But if you don't feel proficient in JavaScript yet, don't let this hinder you from starting to build in React. And I would 100% agree with this. I think a lot of new developers get stuck in what we call tutorial hell, and they get stuck in the vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and they feel like I can never go on to learning React or Next.js until I know everything there is to know about JavaScript. And in my opinion, that is simply not true. In fact, you learn way more about JavaScript, in my opinion, by working in React and Next.js than you really ever would building in vanilla. And that is because of what we just sort of saw, right? It's just so complicated to work in JavaScript alone, and it really hinders your ability to build projects quickly and organize those projects in a proficient manner. So it is good to understand the basics, but you really don't need to know everything about JavaScript before working in React and Next.js. So I challenge you to sort of push through, and even if some of these things are not super familiar to you, you can look up how they work, and you will learn a lot more about them as you learn React. So with that, it's time to take a quiz. Test your knowledge and see what you have learned. Why do you need to compile your React code? React uses a new version of HTML that's too advanced for current browsers. React uses JSX, which needs to be compiled into JavaScript. Or React doesn't know how to update the DOM, so it needs a compiler to do so. Think about it. 1, 2, 3. My answer is B. React uses JSX, which needs to be compiled into JavaScript. Correct. JSX is a syntax extension for JavaScript, but browsers don't understand JSX directly or out of the box, so you'll need to have a JavaScript compiler to transform your JSX code into regular JavaScript. And that's what we did with this line right here, line 6, where we imported the Babel library, and then we changed the type of our script to JSX. So the library Babel knows when we actually go to render the page to transform what we see here into JavaScript, and particularly this part right here. Okay, cool. That's it for chapter 4. In the next one, we will be learning more about building UI with components, understand what essential JavaScript you need to know to start building React applications. So I will see you in the next video.